Welcome back to Pinocchio. Let's continue where we left off. We left off on chapter 18. All right, let's see how far we can read in about 15 minutes. All right. Now, if you guys want me to go longer than 15 minutes, when you see me or you can text me, let me know. Let's go 20 minutes or 30 minutes. I'm willing to do that. I just don't want to make the videos too long for you, and I don't want you to get tired of sitting and watching. All right. So, chapter 18. Pinocchio meets again the fox and the cat and goes with them to bury his money in the field of miracles. He's behaving a little foolish, isn't he? Because he's not going to school. He's trying to get out of going to school because he's finding other things that seem to be more attractive, but in reality, they're just traps, and he's going to pay some bad consequences, right? Okay. The fairy, as you can imagine, allowed the puppet to cry and to roar for a good half an hour over his nose, which would no longer pass through the door of the room. This she did to give him a severe lesson and to correct him in the disgraceful fault of telling lies, the most disgraceful fault that a boy can have. But when she saw him quite disfigured and his eyes swollen out of his head from weeping, she felt full of compassion for him. She therefore beat her hands together, and at that signal 1,000 large birds called woodpeckers flew in at the window. They immediately perched on Pinocchio's nose and began to peck at it with such zeal that in a few minutes his enormous and ridiculous nose was reduced to its usual dimensions. "What a good fairy you are," said the puppet, drying his eyes, "and how much I love you." "I love you also," answered the fairy, "and if you will remain with me, you shall be my little brother, and I will be your good little sister." "I would remain willingly, but my poor papa—" "I have thought of everything. I have already let your father know, and he will be here tonight." "Really?" shouted Pinocchio, jumping for joy. "Then, little fairy, if you consent, I should like to go meet him. I am so anxious to give a kiss to that poor old man, who has suffered so much on my account, that I am counting the minutes." "Go then, but be careful not to lose yourself. Take the road through the wood, and I am sure that you will meet him." Pinocchio set out, and as soon as he was in the wood, he began to run like a kid. But when he had reached a certain spot, almost in front of the big oak, he stopped, because he thought that he had heard people among the bushes. In fact, two persons came out onto the road. Can you guess who they were? His two traveling companions, the fox and the cat, with whom he had supped at the inn of the Red Crawfish. "Why, here is our dear Pinocchio," cried the fox, kissing and embracing him. "How come you be here?" That's how actually he said it. "How come you be here?" "How come you be here?" repeated the cat. "It is a long story," answered the puppet, "which I will tell you when I have time. But do you know that the other night, when you left me alone at the inn, I met with assassins on the road?" "Assassins!" Oh, poor Pinocchio. What did they want? "They wanted to rob me of my gold pieces." "Villains?" said the fox. "Infamous villains," repeated the cat. "But I ran away from them," continued the puppet, "and they followed me, and at last they overtook me and hung me to a branch of that oak tree." And Pinocchio pointed to the big oak, which was 2 steps from them. "Is it possible to hear of anything more dreadful?" said the fox. "In what a world we are condemned to live! Where can respectable people like us find safe refuge?" While they were thus talking, Pinocchio observed that the cat was lame of her front right leg, for in fact she had lost her paw with all its claws. He therefore asked her, "What have you done with your paw?" The cat tried to answer, but became confused. Therefore the fox said immediately, "My friend is too modest. That is why she doesn't speak." Modest means like kind of a little shy. She doesn't really want to tell the truth because she doesn't want to make anyone look bad. Is she really modest? No, she's getting caught. My friend is too modest, and that is why she doesn't speak. I will answer for her. I must tell you that an hour ago we met an old wolf on the road, almost fainting from want of food, who asked alms of us, in other words, asked for help. Not having so much as fishbone to give him, what did my friend, who was really the heart of a, has the heart of a Caesar, do? She bit off one of her forepaws and threw it to that poor beast that he might appease his hunger. And the fox, in relating this, dried a tear. So he goes, yeah, she bit off her paw and she gave it to the poor wolf who was dying of hunger. Pinocchio was also touched, and approaching the cat, he whispered into her ear, if all cats were like you, how fortunate the mice would be. I'm not, and now what are you doing here? Asked the fox of the puppet. I'm waiting for my papa, whom I expect to arrive every moment. And your gold pieces? I've got them in my pocket, but one that I spent at the inn of the rock crawfish. I'm sorry, of the red crawfish. And to think that instead of 4 pieces by tomorrow they might become 1 or 2,000. Why do you not listen to my advice? Why will you not go and bury them in the field of miracles? Today it is impossible. I will go another day, said Pinocchio. Another day will be too late, said the fox. Why? Because the field has been bought by a gentleman, and after tomorrow no one will be allowed to bury money there. How far off is the field of miracles? Oh, not more than 2 miles. Will you come with us? In half an hour you will be there. You can bury your money at once, and in a few minutes you will collect $2,000. Then this evening you will return with your pockets full. Will you come with us? Pinocchio thought of the good fairy, of old Geppetto, and the warnings of the talking cricket, and he hesitated a little before answering. He ended, however, by doing as all boys do who have not a grain of sense and who have no heart. He ended up by giving his head a little shake and saying to the fox and the cat, let's go, I'll come with you. And they went. After having walked half the day, they reached a town that was called Trap for Blockheads. As soon as Pinocchio entered this town, he saw that the streets were crowded with dogs who had lost their coats, who were yawning from hunger, shorn sheep trembling with cold, uh, roosters without combs or crests, who were begging for a grain of Indian corn, large butterflies who could no longer fly because they had sold their beautiful colored wings, peacocks who had no tails and were ashamed to be seen, and pheasants who went scratching about in a subdued fashion, mourning for their beautiful gold and silver feathers gone forever. In the midst of this crowd of beggars and shamefaced creatures, some lordly carriage passed from time to time containing a fox or a thieving magpie or some other ravenous bird of prey. And where is the field of miracles? Asked Pinocchio. It is here, not 2 steps from us. They crossed the town, and having gone beyond the walls, they came to a solitary field which to look at, resembled all the other fields. We have arrived, said the fox to the puppet. Now stoop down and dig with your hands a little hole in the ground and put your gold pieces in it. Pinocchio obeyed. He dug a hole and he put in the 4 gold pieces that he had left, and then filled up the hole with a little earth. Now then, said the fox, go to that canal close to us. Fetch a can of water and water the ground where you have sowed the gold pieces. Pinocchio went to the canal, and as he had no can, he took off his old shoes and, filling it with water, he watered the ground over the hole. He then asked, is there anything else that needs to be done? Nothing else, answered the fox. We can now go away. You can return in about 20 minutes, and you will find a shrub pushing its way through the ground, and in its branches quite loaded with money. The poor puppet, beside himself with joy, he thanked the fox and the cat 1,000 times and promised them a beautiful present. We wish for no presents, answered the 2 rascals. It is enough for us to have taught you the way to enrich yourself and without undergoing hard work. And we are as happy as folks out for a holiday. Thus saying, they took leave of Pinocchio, and wishing him a good harvest, they went about their business. Now, can you get rich without working hard? No, you can't. But obviously, Pinocchio hasn't learned that because he doesn't want to go to school. In order to be blessed, you have to work, and God will bless the work of your hands. All right? Chapter 19. The puppet returned to the town and began to count the minutes one by one. And when he thought that it must be time, he took the road leading to the field of miracles. And as he walked along with hurried steps, his heart beat fast, tick tack, like a drawing room clock when it is really going well. Meanwhile, he was thinking to himself, if instead of 1,000 gold pieces, I wish to find on the branches of the tree 2,000, and instead of 2,000, suppose I find 5,000, and instead of 5,000, what if I found 100,000? Oh my goodness, what a fine gentleman I should then become. I would have a beautiful palace and 1,000 little wooden horses and 1,000 stables to amuse myself with a cellar full of wine and sweet syrups and a library quite full of candies and tarts and plum cakes, macaroons and biscuits with cream. He has a wild imagination, doesn't he? But he doesn't want to go to school and work. While he was building these castles in the air, he had arrived. Building castles in the air means you're dreaming or you're fantasizing. He arrived in the neighborhood of the field, and he stooped to see if by chance he could perceive a tree with its branches full of money. But he saw nothing. He advanced another 100 steps, nothing. He entered the field, and he went right up to the little hole where he had buried his sovereigns or his money, and there was nothing. He then became very thoughtful, and forgetting the rules of society and his good manners, he took his hands out of his pockets and gave his head a long scratch. At that moment, he heard an explosion of laughter close to him, and looking up, he saw a large parrot perched on a tree, pruning the few feathers he had left. That means he was cleaning with his beak, he was cleaning his feathers, not pruning as in cutting. Why are you laughing? Asked Pinocchio in an angry voice. I'm laughing because in pruning my feathers I tickled myself under my wings. The puppet did not answer, but went to the canal, and filling the same old shoe full of water, he proceeded to water the earth afresh that covered his gold pieces. While he was thus occupied, another laugh, and more impertinent than the first, rang out in the silence of that solitary place. Once for all, shouted Pinocchio in a rage, may I know, you ill-educated parrot, what you're laughing at? I'm laughing at those simpletons who believe in all the foolish things they are told them and who allow themselves to be entrapped by those who are cunning than they are. Simpleton means somebody who's not very smart. So she said, the parrot said, I'm laughing at those not very smart people who listen to those very sneaky people who trap them with their lies. Are you perhaps speaking of me? Yes, I'm speaking of you, poor Pinocchio, of you who are simple enough to believe that money can be sown and gathered in the fields in the same way as beans and gourds. I also believed it once, and today I'm suffering it. Today, but it's too late. I have at last learned to put a few pennies honestly together. When he says, I put my pennies honestly, that means I work for them to earn them. I put few pennies together honestly. It is necessary to know how to earn them, either by the work of your own hands or by the cleverness of your own brains. I don't understand you, said the puppet, who was already trembling with fear. Have patience, I will explain myself better, said the parrot. You must know, then, that while you were in the town, the fox and the cat returned to the field. They took the buried money, and then fled like the wind, and now that catches them will and now he who catches them will be clever. Pinocchio remained with his mouth open, and not choosing to believe the parrot's words, he began with his hands and nails to dig up the earth that he had watered. And he dug and dug and dug and made such a deep hole that a rick of straw might have stood upright in it. But the money was no longer there. He rushed back to the town in a state of desperation and went at once to the courts of justice to denounce the two knaves who had robbed him to the judge. So he went to the court to tell the judge what had happened to him. The judge was a big ape of a gorilla tribe, an old ape respectable for his age, his white beard, but especially for his gold spectacles without glasses. In other words, he was wearing glasses but it had no glass in it. That he always that he was always obliged to wear on account of an inflammation of the eyes that had tormented him for many years. Pinocchio told him the story in the presence told the story in the presence of the judge, all the particulars of the infamous fraud of which he had been the victim. He gave the names, the surnames, and the other details of the two rascals, and ended by demanding justice. The judge listened to him, and here's Pinocchio telling the judge, who's an ape. Oops, let me see. Right there. The judge listened with great benignity. He took a lively interest in the story. He was much touched and moved, and when the puppet had nothing further to say, he stretched out his hand and rang a bell. At this summons, two mastiffs, mastiffs are a type of large dog, dressed as gendarmes, dressed as policemen, appeared. Then the judge, pointing to Pinocchio, said to them, "That poor devil has been robbed of 4 gold pieces. Take him up and put him immediately into prison." That sounds a little unfair, doesn't it? He just got robbed, and this judge is telling the policeman to put him in jail. I think he's a little confused. The puppet was petrified on hearing this unexpected sentence and tried to protest. But the gendarmes avoided losing time, stopped his mouth, and carried him off to the lockup. And there he remained for 4 months, 4 long months, and he would have remained longer still if a fortunate chance had not released him. For I must tell you that the young emperor who reigned over the town of Trapped for Blockheads, having won a splendid victory over his enemies, ordered a great public rejoicings. There were illuminations, fireworks, horse races, velocipede races, and as a further sign of triumph, he commanded that the prisoners should be let free. They opened the prisons, and all the prisoners were liberated. "If the others are to be let out of prison, I will go also," said Pinocchio to the jailer. "No, not you," said the jailer, "because you do not belong to this fortunate class." "I beg your pardon," replied Pinocchio. "I am also a criminal." "In that case, you are perfectly right," said the jailer, and taking off his hat and bowing to him respectfully, he opened the prison doors and let him escape. That's kind of a little backwards, isn't it? Okay, so we got all the way to chapter 19. So 18, let me see. Yes, 18 and 19 is all we were able to get through. And so next week we'll continue with chapter 20, all right? I hope you enjoyed the story. Bye-bye.